Assalamu alaikum, ladies. Alhamdulillah, I finally did it. I actually wrote a book. It's dedicated to all the single Muslim mothers out there, hence the name How to Be a Single Muslim Mum. Inshallah, it's available as an ebook, paperback, and it will be available as an audio. Alhamdulillah. Barakallahu feekum, sisters, for the support. Check out the link in the description to get yours. The Niqabi Diaries, Season 4. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode, season 4 of the Niqabi Diaries. Alhamdulillah, it's episode, it's number 3 of Niqabi's notes. So, another 5th Saturday, our 3rd one this year, alhamdulillah. And today, inshallah, firstly, I'm going to be giving some updates about the channel, about the podcast in general, inshallah, and today's topic, I'm going to be actually talking about the book that I've written recently called How to Be a Single Muslim Mum. Please excuse the background noise. I'm outside at the moment, and it's raining a little bit, but I have to take this opportunity to be able to record it, inshallah. Okay, so this is going to be, inshallah, the last season of the Niqabi Diaries, at least on a weekly basis. I may, it could be that maybe in the future I might do, an odd episode here and there, but I'm not going to be having weekly uploads like I have been for the past 4 seasons. And as you all know, I took last year off because of family commitments. So basically, I just want to focus on my family and as well learning Arabic. That's something that I've always wanted to do and I still haven't done yet. So I really need to take more time to focus on these things, inshallah. So that's my main reason for stopping weekly episodes. I've got a lot of other things, a lot of other projects that I'm going to be continuing with. So I'm not completely disappearing, inshallah. The second thing as well, this leads to my second point, which is that I will be rebranding the Niqabi Diaries to a Niqabi's Notes. This is mainly because, as I said, I'm not completely disappearing. I will be still posting from time to time on a range of different subjects. One being my book, another, and as most of you who follow this channel know, I have 2 other podcasts on this channel, which is the Author's Podcast by the Pen, and my other main podcast, which is Polygyny Talks. So because I have these other, kind of discussions and podcasts on the channel, I will be rebranding to these Notes, inshallah. I think that's more fitting going forward, especially since I won't be continuing the weekly episodes of the Niqabi Diaries. Alhamdulillah, I've really enjoyed doing the podcast in general, but it's a lot of work, especially being able to contact sisters and all the kind of background work that it takes to be able to put the episodes out there. But alhamdulillah, I've benefited a lot from doing the podcasts. And really, I have, and I've really enjoyed it. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from me. And I pray that, inshallah, that those of you who have been following and listening, whether new or old, you inshallah have been benefiting and continue to benefit from the podcasts. So the topic of discussion for today is my book that I've written called How to Be a Single Muslim Mum. Alhamdulillah, it took me, how long could I say it take me to write this book? When did I start writing it? I think it was 2020 probably, and I released it just beginning of this year. So that's about 5 years, right? So yeah, I had it was kind of an on and off thing. And why did I write this book? Okay, so firstly, a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an African Caribbean revert. I became Muslim when I was 18 years old. Alhamdulillah. And then after that, shortly after that, not too quickly, but yeah, I got married when I was 20. And by the age of 24, 25, I was divorced. And I had 2 children. So that's how I became a single Muslim mum. And alhamdulillah, so I'm an artist, a hijama therapist. Obviously, I've been doing the podcast as well, so that makes me a special podcaster. Now, alhamdulillah, I'm an author as well, who have written this book. And going forward, I intend to continue writing and with the articles. And I have ideas for some other books as well. Inshallah, I don't know when those are going to be out, but they're work in progress basically. So alhamdulillah, why did I write this book? I wrote this book basically. I was basically encouraged by a young sister who was unmarried at the time. I don't know if she's married now. I haven't heard from her for a while actually. But she encouraged me. She encouraged me to write this book. One time I was actually doing hijama for her, and she started asking me questions about motherhood and how I cope
being a single mom and stuff like that. And, I just started telling her just the regular things that I usually tell people when they ask me that question. And then she said, "Oh, like, you should write a book about this. We have so many good tips to give and stuff like that." And, I was thinking, well, who really cares about what I have to say? But when she said that, I started thinking, after our discussion and I went home and everything, I started thinking more and more about it. And I thought to myself, well, sometimes I do feel like I have something, that I can share with others. And people do ask me, it's not the first time somebody asked me that question, how I cope with being a mother and raising two children. Alhamdulillah, often I would get complimented on how well behaved my children are and everything like that. So I thought to myself, well, it can't hurt if I start writing something, then we'll just see how it goes. So as I started writing, obviously, so many different things started coming to my mind, and gradually and slowly, the book developed over a period of time, and even with encouragement from some sisters, and eventually, my now husband. Sometimes I stopped writing for long periods because I did have that, what they call imposter syndrome, where I would think to myself, what's the point in me even continuing to write this? Nobody's interested in what I've got to say. Who am I? These kind of questions that come to your mind. So I had a lot of kind of self doubt, I suppose you could say. But alhamdulillah, I persevered, and I managed to finish the book. And alhamdulillah, we have it here. So inshallah, I'm going to read part of the introduction. Throughout our Islamic history, there are so many examples of single mothers from our pious predecessors. It makes me wonder how those women of the past who were held in such high esteem during their times, regardless of their marital status, would think of our state now. This is because today, many of us single Muslims, whether we are divorced, bereaved, or yet to be married, are made to feel that we only have status if we have a husband. There is no doubt that marriage is a part of our deen and highly encouraged in Islam, but it is a sunnah and not an obligation unless one is really in need of it. However, our status as Muslims does not depend on our marital status. Allah tells us in the Quran, "Indeed, the Muslim men and the Muslim women, the believing men and believing women, the obedient men and obedient women, the truthful men and truthful women, the patient men and patient women, the humble men and humble women, the charitable men and charitable women, the fasting men and fasting women, the men who guard their private parts and the women who do so, and the men who remember Allah often and the women who do so. For them, Allah has prepared forgiveness and a great reward." Surah Al-Ahzab 35. There is in the Muslim community today stigma attached to single women past their mid 20s and upwards, divorced women, and especially divorced single mothers. Although previously married twice, our mother Khadija radiallahu anha was given the best of men, our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He accepted the proposal of this single mother of two children, and she was never looked at as if she was second-hand goods or downtrodden. And this was not unique in her time. Divorced women were as desirable for marriage as virgins, and having children previously was not an issue. The Muslim society, in fact, flourished, with many examples of male companions marrying divorced and widowed women and starting new families with them, as well as caring for their children. Regardless of how we have reached this point, this is where we are. Like the saying, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. We just have to make the best of what we have. We may not have the influence to change our communities, but we can start with ourselves. Many of us have unfortunately become victims to the narratives of single motherhood due to the reinforcement of social stereotypes. Some of us have allowed our circumstances or the opinions of those around us to cause us to forget our value as individuals. We are first and foremost Allah's creation, made with the sole purpose to worship Him alone. Whatever happens to us in this life, whether it is perceived to be good or bad, is part of our unique journey back to Him. Therefore, no one has the right to make us feel that we are less than or less worthy of good after living through some unfortunate situations. So that's just a short, a couple of paragraphs from the introduction. I'm doing that. And what I want to talk about next is the title of the book. Okay, so as you can see, it's called "How to Be a Single Muslim Mum." So when I first started to share this book with some of my contacts, basically one sister who was very well respected in the community, may Allah bless her, she asked me to reconsider the title because she thinks that possibly people may kind of misconstrue it to mean something, that I'm maybe encouraging women to leave their husbands, or that it's a man hating book or something, along those lines. And do I hate men? Absolutely not. That's quite ridiculous, subhanAllah, especially as somebody who's aspiring to be a student of knowledge, admiring and respecting masculine qualities is one of the, kind of conditions actually for being a student of knowledge. And alhamdulillah, I am married now after being a single Muslim mother for over 12 years. So I definitely don't hate men, alhamdulillah. And another question people may ask is, am I encouraging women to dump their husbands? Absolutely not. I would be left. That's something that I definitely have never ever done. So it's not a book for bashing men or anything like that. This book is just specifically for single Muslim mothers who are maybe feeling like, conflicted in their religion or whatever, like kind of challenges we face, because they're multiple and varied. Sometimes we might be holding strong to our deen, and maybe we're having issues in other areas. Maybe some of us are really desiring that we get married again, and we're struggling with that journey of not being able to find another spouse. Obviously I was single for 12 years, so that's something that I went through, alhamdulillah. And some of us, maybe I feel lost in being single again. Some of us, maybe we're struggling with establishing ourselves as individuals, and having that identity, like this new identity. We're now mothers, but we're single. So we're no longer wives for whatever reason, whether it be through divorce or through bereavement, losing our husbands, through death. So there's so many kind of different experiences and challenges that women face when becoming single Muslim mothers. So that's why I wrote the title as it is, which is How to Be a Single Muslim Mother, because it is a state of being, but it doesn't mean that is all of who we are. We are multiple layers, individuals. That's something that everybody goes through, whether we're Muslim mothers or just single women in general, whatever the case may be. No person is like just flat, just one dimension or something. We have different dimensions to us, our personalities, our characters, and our capabilities as well. There's just many layers that consider that. So that's why I wrote the title as it is, How to Be a Single Muslim Mom. It's not how to become a single Muslim mom. So I'm not encouraging anybody to get divorced or ditch their husbands or however else people could become single. I'm not encouraging anything like that. May Allah preserve those who are married and their marriages. So the book is basically aimed at encouraging those women who are single Muslim mothers in basically being able to flourish in their journey, and take comfort in the fact that they are single and they are Muslim and they are mothers. There's a lot of barakah in those three things. So my main objectives with this book is basically to just encourage single Muslim mothers to enjoy the journey. Like, at least just try to enjoy the journey and accept it. Firstly accept like that you're a single Muslim mother, and accept that Allah's put you in this situation. Allah's this is where this is part of your qadr. This is part of Allah's decree for you to be in this state, and not to feel that because you're in this situation that it means that Allah has abandoned you, or that Allah hates you, or anything like that. I really want to encourage single Muslim mothers to really hold on to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like really stick to your religion. Unfortunately, one of the things that I've seen in the community, and that's not just from readers, but from sisters who are from Muslim families as well, is that sometimes when people do get divorced, they end up kind of falling off the religion. Like they stop practicing, maybe stop wearing hijab, stop praying. I even had an episode a few years back, actually. I think it was the first season of the Niqabi Diaries. I spoke with two sisters, and one was a single Muslim mum, the other one was a divorced sister, and we spoke about hijab after divorce, and it's something that is commonly seen where sisters, they get divorced especially when they get divorced, that they just take their hijabs off, and they're trying to maybe I don't know, trying to they feel that I think there's conflict, and they feel some conflict in their religion, maybe because of being abused in the marriage, in a variety of ways. Could be emotional abuse, could be that maybe their previous husband used the religion kind of against them to make them feel like oppressed somewhat. Or maybe that's how they felt, even if the husband didn't specifically do that. Maybe that's how they felt because of their lack of understanding of the religion. Um, as well. Sometimes, sometimes women feel that removing the hijab means that, they can become more desirable and therefore find another man quicker. Because sometimes, we seem to, sometimes women think that, you know, um, they just don't want to be single. They feel that they need to be in a relationship. They feel that they need to be with a man. They need to be with a husband so that they can have that status. And, sometimes I think sometimes women go through this kind of train of thought where they feel that if they've come through a divorce and they've become single through a divorce and from having a not so good marriage, they feel that one of the best ways to get revenge is to show that they can remarry again and find somebody again, because they are still desirable, they are still worthy. So sometimes we are seeking worth, our worth, our self-worth as women through men, and through how desirable we are to men, and how easy it is for us to get married. But it's not about how quickly or how easy you can get married. It's you know how you can stay in marriage. How fruitful your marriage will be. The quality of your marriage. It's not about quantity. It's or how quickly you can do something. It's about how well you can do it. So marriage is it's not a joke, and it's really important. So that's one of my main objectives. That's one of my main objectives, is just to encourage those who are single Muslim mothers to, kind of mentally prepare themselves and to consciously parent as well their children, like on a daily basis, because it can be stressful sometimes when you feel that you're on your own. Because sometimes, unfortunately, sisters who are single Muslim moms don't have the advantage of co-parenting. Sometimes they are literally doing everything by themselves. Sometimes those children, are left, even if they aren't, orphans, they may be still being raised as if they're orphans, because maybe the fathers are not taking part in their lives, or not actively taking a role in their lives. Sometimes they don't get to see their fathers at all. I mean, I personally know a sister who, her children's father rarely sees them, like literally rarely. When I say rarely, I mean like not even once a year. It's not even once every couple of years. SubhanAllah. So and that's not and that wasn't because she didn't want him to see them. He just kind of decided to move away and start a new family. And this is something that happens. Sometimes it's easy for a man to get divorced and just move away from the town where his children live, or the city where his children live, or even the country where his children live, and just go and marry somebody else and start a whole new family altogether. That happens. And how often do those children get to see their father then? So I know that with new technology now we can do video calls and things like that, but I really don't think it's the same as having a father physically present. So these are the kind of challenges that single Muslim mothers have to go through, especially in this kind of situation as a woman, when you've been divorced specifically. That that your children still have a father and he's not really playing an active role in their lives. How do you, as an individual, balance your maybe feelings of discontentment or animosity towards that man, while at the same time, shielding your children from those feelings that you have personally, and encouraging them, and making sure that they uphold the rights of their father, by being dutiful or honoring their father, and making sure that they're obedient, and see all these different kinds of things. There's a lot of challenges. These are some of the things that I personally went through, and sometimes definitely we will fall short from being able to keep up with these things. But Allah doesn't place on us a burden more than we can bear. So definitely this book is for already single moms, revert or not. Okay, so it's not specific for reverts, even though yes, I'm a revert, but this is something that is not down to whether you're coming from a Muslim background or not. So alhamdulillah. So I'm just going to look at some of the topics that are covered in the book. I've got 14, I'd say 14/15 chapters. Why I say that is because obviously, minus the introduction, I've got 15 chapters, which and the last one, I don't know if you consider it a chapter or not, but it's my parenting tips. And I've stated in the beginning of this book, this isn't a parenting book because I'm not trying to tell people how to raise their kids. Although obviously being part of being a single Muslim mother, you will talk about parenting a little bit, but I'm not specifically talking about going to the details of parenting styles and how to discipline your children or whatever. I don't really go into things like that. But at the end, I have a section which is my parenting tips. Why do I have that? Actually, this came. I remember there's a sister that I know who she got married, and she asked me this when I was still a single mum. And she asked me, what tips do you have as a mother for raising children? So when she asked me that, like these are the things that came to my mind. I'm not going to read them now. If you want to read it, inshallah, get the book. Yeah, inshallah, get the book. I like there were so many things. SubhanAllah, I just started writing. It was in a WhatsApp message actually. I started writing and writing and writing. So many things was coming to my mind too. This was before I even had written this book. Actually, that's the last section. My parenting tips was written well before even thinking about writing a book. And she was happy, alhamdulillah, with the advice that I gave her, and she really found it beneficial. So alhamdulillah. So that's why I don't know if I consider that part of the book specifically as a actual chapter. So I say 14/15. So we say 14 chapters. I'm just going to read through the other titles. We have the first chapter is called Bad Marriage. So in this chapter, I'm just going to summarize each one, inshallah. In this chapter, I basically just kind of try to give you a brief background on where I'm coming from. Because I want sisters who are reading this book going forward to not feel that I'm judging anybody. That's the first thing I think that, the first point I would like to make. I think that's important because, sometimes like my personality can maybe come across as being a bit harsh or strict. I feel sometimes that I'm like that. So that's why I wrote that in the beginning, just so that people can get a good idea of my background, where I'm coming from, what I've been through. So as much as I might come across as being strict sometimes or harsh, I don't know how people, if people like reading will feel like that. Obviously, everybody's different, but I think that if you can, I want people to understand that I, empathize and sympathize because I've been through similar, I've been through certain things, so I can relate to, the journey of other single Muslim mothers, even though everybody's journey is an individual one. Okay, so that's why I briefly wrote that, and I tried my best not to get into Aviva because obviously, my ex-husband is still the father of my two older children. Alhamdulillah, so I have to be careful with that and still be respectful. But I felt that it was important to mention certain things, and this is the chapter that I probably edited the most heavily in order to avoid, getting into the sin of ghiba. So yeah, that's that chapter basically. And the next chapter is Single Mothers Club. So in this chapter, basically, I kind of talk about the kind of support that single Muslim mothers will need, basically. And I think sometimes the reason why I went into these specific points is because sometimes I think as women, we don't really realize the situation that we're in when we become single Muslim mothers. And, different situations we're going to end up in. Sometimes we feel like everything's great and everything's okay, we're managing just fine, but we could be falling short in certain areas, or maybe, like, for example, we haven't dealt with particular things in our lives and we've just kind of pushed them to the back. Because, as every mother knows, when you have children, your children become your main focus, and oftentimes we sacrifice our own health, our own well-being, emotionally, even spiritually sometimes, which we shouldn't, definitely not the spiritual side, but sometimes we sacrifice those things because we try to, do for our children, and we have them as their priority, and we're constantly worrying and thinking about them and their well-being. So sometimes we may not realize that we are in need of certain things or certain areas that we actually need help in. And in this chapter, I also talk about some of the misconceptions about single Muslim moms that people in the Muslim community kind of think, at least from my experience. Okay, so yeah, so for example, people thinking that we have extra time because we don't have husbands, or people automatically assume that you definitely want to get married again. You know, sometimes single Muslim moms don't really want to get married again. Sometimes sometimes maybe we're not ready to get married again. So there's different things that I've mentioned in this chapter. The next chapter is called self-esteem. And in this chapter, I basically talk about how it's important to develop ourselves. And not only that, but I kind of touch on how we can develop ourselves, but also I talk about how important it is to avoid certain people who affect our self-esteem. So some of those people may be those who they constantly like kind of repeat the same things over and over again and make you feel tired about your existence. Basically, like every time you meet them, they're always just talking about the same stuff. Like, and it's about you. Like they're focusing on your life, what you do, and why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And maybe you don't want to do those things. That's why you haven't done it. But every time you meet them, they're going to ask you those questions repeatedly, again and again. And then you have people in the community, for example, I've called them the Oprah mouth. Yeah, that's a West African term. So those are the people who, like, anything you tell them, they'll like just go and start talking about it in the community. So they, basically they're the gossips. Okay, they always have, they can't keep anything to themselves. They'll just go and tell other people, like, your own business. The next chapter is healing with children in mind. And that kind of just talks about how important it is to um, you know, navigates our journey of self healing with raising our children at the same time. Because obviously, like I mentioned, we often as times we kind of put ourselves on the back burner in order to try to do for our children. But the challenge that single Muslim mothers have is that we need to heal while at the same time like taking care of our children. So it's trying to kind of have a balance between those things and still prioritize our healing journey and take it easy on ourselves as well, like not to overwhelm ourselves with trying to do more than is reasonable for us to do. So in this chapter, I basically talk about that kind of mother-child connection and how it's important to keep continually express love to our children, and the different ways in which children, feel or feel that we love them. So every child will be different. Every individual obviously is different. And in this chapter, I talk a little bit about the 5 love languages, and the way that certain people feel that they're, you might have a child, for example, who they always seem to be in your face, and sometimes maybe you're tired and you just want a break, and you're thinking like, why is this child always in my face? Why can't you be like, your brother, or why can't you be like your sister? Like, go and sit and read a book, go and keep to yourself, do something else. So we do have children, like, obviously, as I said, everyone's different. So we do have cases where sometimes we try to make a particular child feel that they should be doing like another child is doing. We do that with our children sometimes, and push them to be other than themselves, and children, they are just themselves. They're always going to be themselves. But, when we're raising them, we have to try to, in our healing journeys, we have to try to consciously, address, the different needs that our children have, so that they don't become broken people as well because of our, inadequacies or our shortcomings as mothers. Because everybody has inadequacies and shortcomings. None of us are perfect, and we're all trying. So it's important to recognize, what your children need and the kind of stability that they need in order to be, happy, healthy, young children. They are the future of this onwards. So we need to be as rounded as possible as much as we can. So I talk about that in this chapter. And in this chapter, I also mention, I try to like make sisters understand, like, to try to, yes, you are in your healing journey, but at the same time, try to put yourself in your children's shoes, and not to the extent where you kind of spoil them or something and do it, but just try to think about your own childhood, and how you felt when your parents did certain things, or where you was maybe certain times when you felt that you wasn't treated fairly, for example. So I talk about reflecting a lot on our childhood, because I think sometimes as well, I think that's really important to reflect on our childhood, specifically because as well, our childhoods and how we were treated and how we've been raised as children has an impact on, who we choose as a spouse. And for those of us who ended up, being single mothers through divorce, you're going to find that in your healing journey, you're going to have to sit down sometimes and think about your childhood and, how it brought you to the point of making certain decisions, that brought you to the point where you are right now. So, in doing so, when you have your children and you're trying to, obviously raise them, it's important to reflect on your childhood and, maybe kind of, you look at any similarities, or you try to recognize certain behaviors or certain, kind of, even the environments, emotion, it could be an emotional environment basically, or a mental environment that your children maybe have similar things in common with you, especially during your childhood. So it's important to sit down and think about these things so that you can, make sure that your children aren't going to be, suffering as a result of your healing journey, and reaching out and getting that support that you need from from your family, or from your wider community if necessary and if possible, obviously. Because sometimes some of us don't have much other options as well. So that's why in this chapter I really talk about just trying to have that connection with your children, not to use them as a crutch for healing, but they are part of your healing journey, because obviously they're there, they exist, and they're with you, you know. So you have to try to do it, in, as conscious a way as possible, not taking out your bad feelings towards your children, for example, but at the same time, making them aware that you are a human being, that, sometimes you will need maybe time to yourself or whatnot, and obviously that it's going to depend back on the age of your children and how much they will understand that. And the main thing is that we don't, use our past traumas to then inflict that negativity towards our own children as, what can I say? It's almost like a, I don't know, maybe you call that a trauma response. So you've been through a traumatic experience. So then you also, when you have the opportunity, or when you're in a position of power, you also inflict, a similar wrongdoing to those people who are under you. So in this case, it would be your children. Sometimes, mothers can do that. It's not just single Muslim moms, but, sometimes this can happen with mothers. Sometimes maybe if you've been neglected as a child, you've never been hugged by your mother, for example. I know sisters who've been, who coming from, two-parent families who've never been hugged by their mum. They've told me that, and that's in different communities. It's not restricted to ethnicity, subhanAllah. So this happens in our community, and it does affect women going forward, in their marriages, in their, single life, whatever situation. So the next chapter is dealing with stress. So in there, I talk about different ways, that you can manage stress, things like that. After that, we've got finding a balance, and that chapter kind of just goes through. It talks about how we can raise our children consciously without trying to like overcompensate in ways that may be damaging to our children, for example. you know. So like one example I give is like spoiling our kids, because they don't have their father around at all. Or even maybe even subconsciously you're trying to compete with their dad, because like when he takes them out, he's gonna, you know, love bomb them and give them lots of gifts all the time. When they go with their father, they come back with, loads of new clothes and, all the new toys that they would that you couldn't afford for them, for example, things like that. So maybe then you decide that you've got to start spoiling them by getting them things that, they don't need, or getting them everything that they ask for, and which could affect your bank balance. Maybe you can't even afford it, but you're doing that because you feel that that's the way that your children feel loved, because that's, because when they come back from their father, they're so happy and so excited because they've had this wonderful time out, and they've got all these lovely new gifts that you couldn't afford to give them. I talk about this and the fact that basically children, they don't need these things. That's not how in reality children know that they've been loved. So and obviously in the previous chapter, the previous chapters I've mentioned, how to express love to your children and how it's important to know your children's love language as well. So obviously gifts can be important, but you don't have to be showering them with gifts, and in order to compete with your, with your children's father, for example. And another example that I touch on in this book as well is maybe what you could call overparenting, or the helicopter mum, as they call it. So those mothers who, they're so worried about their children. Any breath they take, they feel like they're gone into a state of panic because, oh, the child's going to catch a cold, or the child's going to break an arm or break a leg, or they're just always on this kind of high alert, like literally sitting on edge, thinking that something is gonna, some catastrophe is gonna befall their child. So they're just kind of hovering over them all the time, and as a result, they kind of maybe stop their children from really experiencing and developing as individuals. So I touch on these things in this chapter, and how we can, because I think about it's still part of our healing as well, actually, because as I said, sometimes when we're in our healing journey, we may not be conscious that we're doing certain things. The next chapter is, do you need a man? And that's I don't know. I think this is one of the first chapters that I wrote, actually, because I know as single Muslim moms, like, this is something, as me personally, my experience is that every time I met somebody and they asked me who's your husband, all these kind of questions that you get in the community. If you go to the masjid, for example, you get to meet somebody, they're just asking you questions. Who's your husband, like, how many kids you got. When you don't have a husband, and you tell them a little bit about yourself, then they'll be like, oh yeah, why didn't you get married again? Or, don't you want to get married? These kind of questions, you get that a lot. And sometimes you do really want to get married. There was periods of time when I was desperately wanting to get married to find, and it just wasn't happening. And, I used to pray and pray and pray and pray and make so much dua, and, fast and fast and fast, and subhanAllah, like, it just wasn't happening. And then I had to tell myself, like, and subhanAllah, the main reason as well, I think, especially in the beginning, because I got divorced, I was like 24, 25 years old. So I felt like this is my prime. And initially, I didn't want to get remarried. For the first year of being divorced, I didn't actually want to get remarried, because I felt so traumatized from marriage. I just like, was just like, I couldn't imagine being with another man again. And I remember one of my friends, like an auntie, actually, she said to me, she said, like, give it some time, and you're gonna be dying for a husband, before you know it. And to follow, it was about a year. It was about a year or so, and, like, literally, I was like really, really, really desperately wanted to get married again. Like, that's all I could think about. And I had periods of time in that 12 years that, especially in the first half, I could say, because obviously I was in my youth, that was my prime, you know. And there's that hadith that talks about the age of the people of Jannah is 33. So in my mind, I kind of thought to myself, like, I need to, like, get married before I'm 33, because that's my prime. And I want to have more kids as well, and my children are young now. So if I get married now, it's good, because, like, then they can easily adapt to the new husband, and inshallah, then I can have more kids, and they can be raised together as well. There won't be so much of a gap. All these things I was thinking about, and I used to try to, you know like, do whatever I could to find, husbands. So I've had the whole kind of experience, the marital sites, and, letting people in the community know the king, all this kind of stuff. And it just wasn't working. Like, subhanAllah, like, I just never met that person that I clicked with, or, felt that was compatible with me. I came close, I think, in the first half, I think I thought I had come close once. There was like a brother who I thought would be great, but then that just kind of didn't work out at all. He disappeared. And then and then literally just before I met my husband that I have now, it was a year before, I literally thought I'd met the one. I thought, like, yeah, I'm getting married soon, like, I was really excited and stuff. But, like, this is the first brother I've actually had two meetings with him. And we seemed to get on really well. Everything was going perfectly good and stuff like that. And then he disappeared, kind of, he ghosted a little bit. And then when he came back and contacted the brother about stuff, and he was just like, oh, he doesn't think that we're compatible or whatever. And he made his excuses. And I was just like, well, how do you do that? I can tell, obviously, if someone's ghosted you, they're not really interested, are they? Do you know what I mean? But yeah. So that when that happens, that was me. Like, I was just thinking, well, obviously it's been like, it was like, I think 11 years or so by then. So I was just thinking to myself, well, class, like, let me just sit down and wait for my grandkids, because by then my daughter was like nearly 16, I think. So I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna wait for this one to get married and get some grandkids and take care of them. That's like how I had it in my mind. So I've been through I know how it feels basically to be really dying for a husband. Okay. So that's what I address in this chapter. So inshallah, have a read and like see what you think, because it's definitely interesting. And also point out something specifically for reverts as well in the community, because I think that often reverts, we have a very different experience when it comes to being able to get married, because obviously you don't come from Muslim families, so there's a whole network that you're not connected to because you don't come from a Muslim family. It can decrease your chances of being able to find somebody through obviously relatives, and our wali as well is never going to be somebody from our family unless that person is also a Muslim. So these are the kind of disadvantages that that readers can experience when it comes to the topic of marriage. And as not only that, but often I think as reverts, some of us feel that we need a husband in order to able to function properly as Muslims. It's like we take it as part of our Muslim identity, I feel sometimes, you know, and especially for those of us that who maybe got married very quickly after becoming a Muslim, we see it as so tightly connected with our Muslim identity that when we don't have a husband, it's almost like we don't know how to navigate in the Muslim community anymore, because that culture that our husband brought, that Muslim culture that he brought to us is now gone. We're left by ourselves and having to, maybe married with I don't know, an Egyptian, for example, and became accustomed to cooking Egyptian dishes and stuff like that, and hearing the Egyptian, Arabic and all these different things, and then then when the marriage is finished, you don't know how your identity is as a Muslim anymore, because often sometimes Muslim women, we especially reverts, we take on the Muslim identity of the man we were married to, whichever background it comes from. We start dressing like how their women dress, cooking the foods that they're accustomed to, all these kind of things. And those are positive things. I'm saying they're bad. There's nothing wrong with it. Something nice and beautiful. But at the same time, if we end up single after that, then we can feel like, almost like we're lost. Like, what kind of Muslim am I now? Because, like, coming from this background that I was married with this person, he's from Pakistan, and now I'm no longer married. So how do I navigate? What's my identity as a Muslim? So I think it's important for readers, especially, we need to really and I just touched on this in this chapter. I didn't really go in so hard with it, but we need to protect ourselves as well from being pushed into marriages, okay, that we don't really want or that are not going to be good for us. So the next chapter is we don't give birth to our parents. So in this chapter, I kind of just talk about how important it is for us to respect our parents as Muslims as much as we can, whatever the relationship is, because our children are going to look at that relationship, whether we're in contact with our parents or not. They're going to look to that relationship, and kind of, it's going to affect how they see their relationship with us in a way, like whether it's little or a lot. And I'm not saying that if you have toxic parents that your children, and you kind of keep your contact with your parents very limited, that your children are also going to be wanting to limit their contact with you. No, that's not what I'm saying. But it's important that we show our children how to deal with our parents, and whether we have a good relationship with them or not. So there's that duty that a walidain is like something. It's a military in Islam, keeping that relationship, keeping the family ties. We can't like cut them off. And at the same time, there's the issue as well, which I talk about in this chapter, is sometimes our parents, maybe as children, they treated us like crap. Some of us have gone through really like horrific childhoods. But then when we have children, maybe our parents will treat our children like, the best, they'll be the best ever grandparents for us. Or sometimes they won't. Maybe they're going to be terrible grandparents because they just hate us anyway. So they hate anything that comes from us, including our kids. So a lot of us go through these different things, which can be traumatic. And that's why I call it, we don't give birth to our parents. So we didn't give birth to our parents. So we're not responsible for how they behave, but we are responsible for how we behave towards them. So that's just another relationship dynamic that I talk about in this book. So the next chapter is dream big. So this is about having aspirations as a single Muslim mother, and how you shouldn't limit yourself to, to a mindset where you feel that you can't achieve certain things just because you happen to be a single Muslim woman with children. And don't let other people put their limitations or their limited beliefs on you, right? That's really important. Because like sometimes we could be in a situation where there's certain things which are attainable for us and possible for us, but because we haven't sat down to really think about what we want and what we want to achieve or what we could achieve potentially, we don't take advantage of those periods of time when we could actually achieve them. Trust me, I know about this. Being single for such a long time, like it happened to me like a few times where I thought, subhanAllah, like this period I could have done this, this, and this, but my headspace was completely somewhere else. Maybe I was completely distracted by the fact that I was just so focused on getting a husband. But that time I had free time. I could have been doing something more productive for myself, building myself as an individual, so that I could be, just a better version of myself, so you get distracted sometimes, I think. So this chapter is focusing on, how we can be, aspiring to do better and why we shouldn't let our situation, dictate what we can achieve for the sake of Allah as well. We should always have Allah as our focus. So the next chapter is called Your Biggest Investments. And this chapter is specifically talking about our children and how our time that we invest in our children is not wasted, not even a little bit. We are raising the next generation of this ummah. Every mother, every single Muslim mother is, every mother is. So it's important that we don't downplay our role and the impact that we have on our children's lives. And even if we can't do um, other things, like for other, even if we can't do that, maybe we take, because previous chapters called Dream Big, right? So even if there's certain dreams or ambitions that we have that we can't achieve, it's not feasible. It might not be feasible for you to achieve certain things while in different periods of your life, while being a single Muslim mom, for example, maybe because of the age of your children, maybe because of the financial situation, maybe because of accessibility. If you can't achieve certain things that you do want to achieve, I'm not saying completely dismiss it, but you might need to put certain things on the back burner sometimes. My point is that your biggest investment going forward is your children. So by thinking about it in this way, you shouldn't feel that you are stuck. Make sure that you always have in your minds that what you're doing and what everything that you give to your children is an investment for the akhirah. This is first and foremost the akhirah, not just this dunya. It's the akhirah is the most important. So try to be that mother that teaches your children to recite Surah Fatiha, for example. Try to be that mother to make sure that they teach their children how to pray and practice their religion properly, even just the basics, because the basics is what we all have to do on a regular basis every day. So all those actions that your children do, you're going to be the one who gets the reward for that. And inshallah, if you raise those children to the best of your ability and they grow and live for their lives as Muslims, inshallah, those are the children that are gonna make dua for you when you leave this world, inshallah, and they're gonna be a credit to you. You know what I mean? So that's basically what this chapter's about. So I'm just gonna a section from this book, because I mentioned in this section that raising children is your life's work, because your motherhood is a journey, and it's not just when your children are the children. It's about when they're adults as well. They're gonna inshallah grow into adults. So I mentioned here that some of the points that I want people to take away from this section is that you are not trying to manipulate and or control your children. You should feel confident that they have a good moral code of ethics because of how you've raised them, and you respect that doing something differently doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. So these are some of the things I've mentioned in this chapter in regards to investing in your children, and knowing that these children are they're going to grow up to be human beings, to have their own lives and function on their own, independent from you. But it's obviously how you've raised them is the first part of their journey towards that. The next chapter is raising daughters. So here I just talk about the mother-daughter relationship basically, and how important it is, and how we need to bond with our daughters. And also, I do mention in this chapter the issue of the hijab and its importance for both mother and daughter, because obviously it's part of our religion, so it's something which is obligatory and shouldn't go unchecked, basically. And the next chapter is raising sons. This chapter as well, it talks about how as single Muslim mothers, especially like the main point that I picked up, or that I kind of focused on this chapter, I think is one point of difficulty for a lot of us as single Muslim mums, especially us, those of us who might be reverts, and maybe the only revert in our family, and maybe we don't have brothers or fathers who are present, or male relatives basically who are our mahram, for example, or even not. Just we don't have that. If we're raising boys, where we've got one boy or more, those boys will need male role models, especially if their father doesn't like see them on a regular basis. Sometimes that's the situation. If your son doesn't have like weekly, it should be like ideally weekly or daily access would be amazing if he could see his father on a daily basis. Obviously, if the father is somebody who is worthy of being a role model, that's the one thing. But especially if he is, but ideally, what your child, your son and your daughter as well, but your son especially, he's going to get to an age where he needs to see a male presence in his life on a continuous basis, positive male role models, because he can't be looking to you to know how to navigate his life as a man. There's certain principles and maybe characteristics that he may take from you, definitely. We're all human beings at the end of the day. We know that the halal and the haram is for men and women. It's very clear in our religion what's halal and haram, the religious practices and stuff like that. You can teach your boy about these things, but there's certain things that your son's going to be going through, which as a woman you will never, ever, ever, ever be able to understand. So that's what I've mentioned in this book. So it's really important, and I think some of us, if we're fortunate to come from homes where maybe we have a lot of brothers, sisters who might have a lot of brothers, maybe they understand boys better, so it's different for them. But for those of us who maybe only got one brother, or maybe don't have any brothers at all, it could be more challenging. And so I talk about some of the challenges that I've personally faced in the Muslim community having a son, especially when they've got past the age of 10, and how important it is to be able to put him in the presence of men who are going to be you know like positive images of manhood for him. So and that's particularly in the Muslim community, but sometimes it may be that you have to look outside of the Muslim community depending on your situation. And that's realistic, because obviously some of us, as I said, we're reverts coming from non-Muslim backgrounds. So if we're living in communities where there's not many Muslims, or we're living far from the masjid, for example, how do we put that positive male role model in our son's life from the Muslim community if their father isn't around for whatever reason? The next chapter is called Letting Go, and this chapter is just about the fact that as Muslim mothers, single Muslim mothers, we have to, come to the realization that our children aren't always going to be with us, and depending on how long we've been single. Obviously, I was single for, over a decade. So that's a long time that I spent my youth with my children. I feel like I've grown up with them. So I got married when I was 20. And I know that's not so young. Some people say it's young, but like for me, it's like, yeah, I wanted to marry at the age of 20. I can't do that. I married at the age of 20. But yeah, I feel like I did really grow up with them, because I became Muslim when I was 18 as well. So it was like I was a new Muslim, and navigating being a Muslim and also like being a mum. So I feel like I really did grow up with my children. They were my companions, and like I felt like really close to them, closely bonded with them. And but so this chapter I basically talk about the realization that at some point your children, they're not going to stay with you. They're gonna leave you for whatever reason. They'll be getting married, or maybe they want to go and live with their father for whatever reason, and maybe their father lives in a different town, or even a different country from you. Maybe your children will want to go and study somewhere else, and after that studying, they'll naturally just be on a journey to you know starting their own individual lives and getting married and doing other things. Could be work as well. So there's so many different things that can happen. And if you're still a single mom and your children start leaving for whatever reason, you may feel like this kind of sense of abandonment, It's like really difficult for any mother, even married mothers, to let go of their children, like when they're going to do something. And I've spoken to friends of mine who are married, and their children, for example, went to study, and they felt like, they didn't know what to do with themselves. You feel this kind of almost disillusioned, when you don't have your child around, access to your child whenever you want, because that they're just in the house, or every day they're going to be coming back home. When they're not, you feel that distance. You can feel like there's a gap in your life, for example. So this chapter, Letting Go, is basically just talking about those different kind of things that that we should expect, basically, as single Muslim mothers, and try to mentally prepare ourselves for that. And then the last chapter, or not chapter, is some my parenting tips. So yeah, alhamdulillah. And at the back of the book, I've got an interview that I did with a sister. I have actually a mini podcast that goes alongside with this book, which is called Single Muslim Mum, and that's already uploaded. Actually, the series is already uploaded on this channel, so you can access it. So just go to the playlist and you find the episodes there. There's 10 altogether. I'm not sure. I may or may not record more of them in the future. I'm not sure. There was a sister that I was actually really wanting to speak to, and I unfortunately didn't get the opportunity to complete or to do my interview with her because of mostly technical issues and timing issues and stuff like that. So I don't know if in future I'll be able to still interview that sister, because I would really still love to speak with her. Mashallah, I think she has a lot of benefit. But there's 10 different sisters that I've spoken to, mini podcast series, inshallah. So definitely check it out. But this interview that I've got in the back here was with a sister who didn't actually want to be recorded, like voice and stuff like that. So we just did a simple Q&A interview. So that's something to read as well, inshallah. I was thinking I wanted to have more of those, but alhamdulillah, it didn't work out. Like, I think having the podcast series is, alhamdulillah, it's quite ample, sufficient, inshallah. But yeah, that's the book in a nutshell. Oh, the other thing I didn't mention actually that I've got in the book, throughout the book, is so we've, like, before each chapter in the book, I've basically got short profiles of single Muslim mothers in Islamic history. So that starting from Maryam alayhi salam all the way till, like, I think Imam al-Bukhari's mother. The last one actually I've got here is the last one I've got here is the Imam of Ahmed ibn Hanbal. So yeah, so I've got those throughout the book, and I thought it was important to incorporate those into the book, because we don't hear really much often these stories of single Muslim mothers in Islamic history. And I think that even the ones that we do know of, like Maryam alayhi salam, as important as they are, I don't think that in general the community really reflects as much on them like now. Like, I know in the past, like, single Muslim mothers were seen differently. They weren't seen like how we're looking at them today, and especially with certain communities, basically teaching that that you shouldn't marry single Muslim moms, for example, and that we're damaged goods, or, red flags to marry, or whatever, these kind of like negative talks and stuff like that. And obviously, not everything's about marriage in general, but I'm just talking about just how it's seen, even coming back to the title of my book, How to Be a Single Muslim Mom. The concern of the sister that who asked me to, maybe reframe the name of the book, was that it came from the perspective that some people will see it as that I'm trying to encourage women to be single Muslims, but and I'm not at all. But that being said, that shows that we see single Muslim mothers as something is a negative something. Do you know what I mean? And it shouldn't be seen as a positive or a negative. It should just be, it's like, that's just how it is. So we shouldn't look at it as, oh, this is something bad, and we shouldn't look at it as this is something good. It's just a situation. It's just like, that's just how the situation for this person is right now. So it shouldn't be, I think it shouldn't be seen as a negative something, or a positive something. It's just it's just your situation right now, how you are with life, and you're continuing. And I think as Muslims, um, it's like it just reminds me of that hadith that the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that every affair of the believer is good. If something afflicts him that he doesn't like, he says Alhamdulillah. If good happens to him, he says Alhamdulillah. That's how we should see single Muslim motherhood. We need to see it like that. And every day of our life, we need to see like that. It's like we wake up in the morning, go to the kitchen to make our breakfast. Maybe we're going to get some cereal, pour the milk in the bowl. Then we turn and maybe like end up slapping the bowl, and the bowl falls on the floor, smashes, and spill the milk. You don't say, "Oh, I can see this is going to be a bad day." You don't say that. You say Alhamdulillah, and you carry on with your day, trying to be conscious about everything you do throughout the day. You don't say that because something like that happened in the morning, even though you're doing something routine, and something this is not like something, you had this kind of accident or mishap. You don't pronounce that this is going to be a bad day now. That's not how the Muslim is. So the same goes for any situation in our lives. Being a single Muslim mum, you know, definitely it's not something that somebody should want to be. We don't, for example, go into marriages wanting to get divorced or wanting for our husbands to die, or we don't. In Islam, we're not allowed to go and go to these for example, these fertility clinics and get ourselves pregnant by artificial means. We're not allowed to start our motherhood journey as single mothers. That's not what Islam teaches us. That's what Islam is. We're supposed to start on our motherhood journey as mothers. That's why fornication is forbidden. That's why I said we're not allowed to go to these clinics and get artificially inseminated. SubhanAllah. So you know, we need to think about these things. Women who are single mothers, they didn't desire that, even if they wanted or sought the divorce. Okay, so maybe so if you are divorced and you went to seek a divorce. Why did you seek a divorce? Because because it was necessary. But yeah, there's a hadith that talks about a woman who um, you know asked her husband to give for divorce without any valid excuse. So those of us who've had to seek divorce, we've done it with a valid reason. And those of us who the husband just divorced us, it wasn't in our hands. So that's just what it is. It's kind of like if you became a single Muslim mum, you single Muslim mum, say Alhamdulillah and Bismillah and keep going on with your life. That's just it. So I hope that kind of gives everybody a good understanding of what the book is about, why I wrote it, who's it for, and what it isn't. Basically, it's not a man bashing book. Or I've not having hatred of men or anything like that. I don't hate men. I don't hate Muslim men. Alhamdulillah, I've got a husband. I've got a son. They're Muslims, so alhamdulillah, I love them deeply. These are many great in my life. Alhamdulillah. And I've got my father and my brother as well, who they're non-Muslim at the moment. So may Allah guide them. So these are the men I have in my life, and alhamdulillah, they've been a support for me throughout my journey as well. So alhamdulillah, I hope that is clear for everybody. And inshallah, my book is available on a website called Lulu. I don't think you need to make an account with them to buy the book. You can just buy it. That benefits me more than if you buy it on Amazon. But my book is on Amazon for those of you who prefer Amazon. So you can get it from Amazon as well. And also it's available, that's both versions, both of those that's this paperback copy that you see. Yeah, it's paperback. And it's also available as an ebook, which is I've got my Gumroad link in the description. It's also available as an ebook on Gumroad. So inshallah, you can get access to the book through the description box. Okay, everything's there. And inshallah, actually, another thing that I wanted to let you guys know about, I probably should have told you that at the beginning updates, but I'm going to be doing a single Muslim mum blog. I don't know, maybe by the time this video is released, I'll have already started the single Muslim mum blog. I hope so. So yes, inshallah, yeah, you get some benefit from that as well. So I'm going to be talking about a variety of different things that I haven't mentioned in the book, and maybe some things that have been maybe touched on in the book a little bit, but there's other things which are related to being a single Muslim mum. I wanted to talk about, but I didn't feel that they were maybe appropriate for the book specifically. So maybe you can check them out the blog. And I don't know, in future I might even get some maybe guest writers or something like that to write certain things, like if they have anything that they want to contribute to this blog as well. So if you're a single Muslim mum and have something that you want to write about with regards to this topic, then can let me know, inshallah, and we could do a guest post from my blog as well. So jazakallah khair for listening and watching, everyone. And inshallah, until the next time. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Anything that I've said which is good and of benefit is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything that I've said which is not good and wrong and incorrect is from myself and Allah knows best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.